Hello, welcome to the Comptroller of Public Accounts Ta- Bond Tax and Project Database webinar pertaining to HB 103 as passed by the 89th Legislature in the 2025 session. I am Frank Alvarez, the team lead in the local government and transparency section, and I am joined by Brittany Henry, who is the lead analyst in the transparency section. This presentation is essentially in three parts. I will present the first part, which will be essentially a 50,000-foot view of the tool as required by statute and the website. The second part, as presented by Brittany, will focus more so on how to log in to the e-system tool, how to fill out the online report, and how to go online to search for data that has been submitted. Finally, I will briefly present several key questions followed by an answer to each question, which should resolve most of the questions you may have about this program. In our overview, we'll talk about, as we go through this presentation, the following items, the two-step process as to how we got here today in terms of the development of the database and how to report, the statutory and comptroller requirements, the resources that we are making available to you regarding the HB 103 reporting tool, the application web portal, how and what to report, the reporting periods and deadlines, and the key questions. So what is that two-step reporting process? First, the comptroller did phase one, and that phase one is the development of the database, which occurred between August of 2025 through November of 2025. This historical database became active and available for public reporting for tax units to use December 1st through January 1 of 2026. January 1 of 2026 is the statutory mandated date to be completed by. Reporting for all bonds voted on, including any voter-approved tax rate elections, whether approved or failed, and that took place between 2015 through 2025, must be reported by all applicable and qualified taxing units. Phase two will be or encompass the May and November elections that will come up in 2026 and beyond into the annual database. The comptroller will put together or develop this database between the months of January through March of 2026, and this database will become active for taxing units to use sometime in mid-March of 2026. So if you are holding a May 2026 election, you are supposed to report this by August 7 of 2026. And if you are holding a November 2026 election, then you are to report it by August 7 of 2027. So what will be in the database? Statute has a number of requirements for local government taxing units to report. And there are three parts to statute. And this is found in section 403.702, subsection B1. And this pertains to all bond elections, whether proposed or issued. First is the ballot language is to be reported, as well as the projected INS fund tax rate, the votes in support of the ballot proposition, the votes against the ballot proposition, the bond election result, whether it carried or failed, the list of proposed projects to be funded, the dollar amount of any funded projects, the description of any increase in INS tax rate increases, and the estimated minimum dollar amount required to be spent on debt service. The next slide encompasses subsection B2 of that same statute. And requirements 10 through 15 are statutorily required, and requirements 16, 17 are comptroller requirements. And this all pertains to the voter-approved tax rate elections, otherwise known as VATER. First, you are required to submit the taxing unit's current adopted tax rate. Then you're to submit the taxing unit's voter-approved tax rate, as well as the difference between the adopted and voter-approved tax rates. You are also to submit the preceding year's tax rate, the number of votes for and against the proposition, and if the proposition is not approved by the voters, then report what the current tax rate is for the current tax year. As for the comptroller requirements, the comptroller is requiring the bond type, and there's two types of bonds that we are requiring to be reported, be it general obligation bonds, GO bonds, and revenue bonds. And we also require the date of the election. The third part of the database comes from subsection B3. And this here is M&O ISD bond elections. And there's three elements to this. If the proposition is not approved, what is the taxing unit's tax rate for the year? What is the ISD's proposed and or approved tax rate? And what is the ISD's ballot language for M&O taxes that are levied? Here you get a brief snippet, but Brittany will discuss this further, but you'll find a number of key features or key tools on the website, such as the reporting tool, a search page for submitted results, login instructions, a glossary of terms, FAQs, a link to the statute and requirements, a link to HB 3526 that requires the BRB to report similar information as HB 103 in some cases, as well as SB 843 that requires the TEA to report in some cases, similar information as HB 103 requires of us. You'll find a link to this PowerPoint presentation as well as our contact information page. Here, I'd like to highlight three important resources that you should seriously consider reviewing and making it a part of using when you fill out the report tool. The first part is the reference guide. This guide will give you guidance on each of the fields that you're going to be filling out, whether it is in the bond election portion of the report, whether you're doing a VATER election, or if ISDs are doing the M&O election portion of the report. I would strongly recommend that you use this reference guide when filling out the form. The second resource is the glossary, as well as the FAQs. And the glossary provides information on definitional terms that I strongly, again, recommend that you use. And the FAQ page, I strongly recommend that you should use to determine when or how to report or whether to report, or if you're a qualified taxing unit that should be reporting, as well as any other number of issues. And from here, I'll turn it over to Brittany to present her portion of the presentation.
All right, thank you, Frank, and thank you, folks, for being with us. I'm going to start my portion of the presentation just by taking a look at the landing page that Frank kind of gave you a preview of on a couple of slides back, as well as the eSystems login page. So this is going to be on the left-hand side of the screen, the landing page for the Bond Tax and Project Database. As you can see here, it has all of the tools that Frank just discussed as links right here, as well as some simple information about what you will be seeing within the bond database. When you scroll down, you will see all of the current entries for the entities that have submitted their bond information to us as of today, and where your entries will reside once you submit them through eSystems. If you want to take a look at the main page for the program, all you have to do is select the HB 103 category, and it'll bring you all the way back here. And this will give you a very broad overview, just like Frank did, as to the history of the project, as well as to the information that is being captured here. And this is also where you will go to find the link that I have up on the right-hand side of the screen where you're going to submit your information. If we move over to WebFile eSystems login, you see here you've got a user ID and a password requirement. So eSystems is a filing system that the comptroller uses for the majority of our reporting requirements. So if you have a franchise tax account, sales tax account, eminent domain, special purpose district, any sort of reporting that you do for the comptroller's office, you will have a WebFile account, and you can use that same WebFile account for this program as well. If you are a first-time user to WebFile, then there is a login, or excuse me, there is a link here on the login page that will take you back to a video presentation from eSystems, and that will show you how to create your file, how to create your WebFile account. So with those two out of the way, let's just go back to the presentation. We'll skip all the way ahead to my slides. There we go. So like I just showed you, the application web portal is here on eSystems. It's called WebFile. Once you have created your profile and you are logged into WebFile, you will receive, in front of the dashboard for all the programs that are going to be in the requirements for comptroller reporting. This is what the eSystems dashboard will look like. And when you scroll down to the very bottom of that dashboard, this is what you're going to be looking for. So the Bond Reporting Database Initiative, as abbreviated to BRADY, HB 103. Once you select the BRADY tab, you'll have this access page, which will take you to your government details. You'll need your government access code, which will be, or can be provided to you by our office if you have not received it already, and your Texas Taxpayer ID, which can also be provided to us if you did not receive it in previous correspondence. Once you enter both of those numbers into this code, you're going to hit confirm, and that will take you to the next page for the report. Your entity details will then show up. Your entity details will then show up on the next page, and as well as the add new ballot screen and the ballot search screen. From here, you can view, review, and edit any bonds that you have entered up to this point, as well as search any bonds that you have, that your entity has submitted thus far. Once you click on the add new ballot screen, you'll have a selection of three options right in front of you. The first is going to be bond elections, that's subsection B1, as Frank described. The next is going to be voter approval tax rate elections, or VATER elections. That's going to be subsection B2. And number 3 is going to be MNO elections for school districts. That'll be subsection B3. I'm going to go over very briefly each of these pages. You'll find that most of the information will carry over from a couple of different reporting requirements, except for MNO elections. That's a very limited amount of info that you're going to need to submit for that. So for the first ballot election form, it's going to be just your general bond election form. All entities will use this form to report for their bond elections. And basically, when you open up that form, the first two things are going to be already filled in for you. So your taxing entity's name and your taxing entity's primary county. And when we say primary county, we mean headquartered county for where your administrative building is. I use the example of Austin Community College here in the state capital. There are multiple campuses for ACC in and around Travis County, Williamson County, Hayes County, and Bastrop. However, the headquarters for ACC is Middle Fiskfield Road, which is here in Travis County, which is in Austin. So if it was ACC going in to do their ballot election form, they would select Travis County as their county. That doesn't prevent you from submitting the total election results. And if that's what you would like to do, you can do that as well. If you have a entity that straddles several counties, that's just a best practice that we have here to assist entities when they go in to report. You'll also notice that on this screen, the reporting fields that are required in order for you to advance to the next page are going to be denoted by an asterisk right here at the top. So there's a little star right here. If the field does not have one of these little stars right here at the top, you can skip it. You can also fill in the information if you have it available to you. It's just not going to count against you if you do not have it available to you at the time of submission. Up in the upper right-hand corner here, what you see is reference guide, and that's something that Frank spoke about a couple of slides back. The reference guide for each particular ballot form is embedded into the web tool, and you will click this link that says reference guide, and it will take you back to the bond election reference guide, and it will show you step by step what information will need to go into each field. So for bond elections, it's very simple information: votes of support, votes against, election result, carried, defeated, or canceled. An important note: if your bond election was canceled, it never happened, but it was scheduled, you still have to report it. And you are also responsible for submitting the appropriate election result. The vote tally will not automatically select carried or defeated for you. You'll have to do that by hand. As Frank said, here's where the debt type comes in. This is going to be general obligations bond. If you are an ISD and you have a PSF bond, we are asking that you file that as a GO bond for consistency. And then finally, date of election, of course, the date of the bond initiative was put to vote. On the second page for the bond election form, it's going to be for projects. So projects are for any projects that were funded or proposed in the ballot initiative, whether it was carried, defeated, or canceled. And the dollar amount of the projects funded will only apply if monies have been issued for that specific project. When you go to project description, there's going to be a menu here with about 75 different choices. Pick the one closest to the description within the ballot language or in what was bonds were issued for that ballot. And if it's not there, there is an option that you can select other, and it will give you a small amount of free text where you can fill in whatever a short description of that project would be. You will then have to click save, and then you can add another project if you want, or if that's the only project that you have, you can proceed forward. Dollar amount funded, you will see, does not have an asterisk by it because although this is the historical period, not all funds may necessarily have been issued for each project. So at a later date, if those funds are issued, you can come back and edit and add that dollar amount, but it's not going to be required in order for you to proceed through to the next ballot page. The next type of election that we are going to be capturing information for is the voter approval tax rate election, or VATER election, and that is from subsection B through 2 of the HB 103 statute. And again, just like with the bond elections, very simple information at the very beginning. So you will have your taxing unit name, you will have your taxing unit county again, and then unlike with the bond election, ballot purpose does not have an asterisk by it. You are not required to submit a ballot purpose for VATER elections or VATER MNO elections. You may, if you would like to, but it will not prevent you from continuing. Next is going to be, again, with an asterisk by it, the ballot language for the initiative, your votes in support, your votes against, and the result of the election. Of note, if you select that the votes, that the election was defeated, another option will show up here down in tax information, which will request a separate voter approval tax rate from the current year. Now, the final report is going to be M&L elections for school districts, and that's again from subsection B3. And this one is the shortest of them all. So you're going to have the same generic information that's going to be required up here at the top of the ballot. Again, ballot purpose is not required, but if you would like to add one, you may. And then just down here at the bottom, we're only asking for three things: ballot language for the proposition and the school district's proposed and or approved tax rate. Once you have filled in your specific bond form, you'll get to the very last page, and that's going to be the authorization page. So you will need to submit your full name right here of the person filling out the form, today's date, so the date that you filled it in, and then you will need to read and click on this acknowledgement that you swear and affirm that this is true and correct and complies with the information required by 403.702 of the government code. And then once you click on that little checkbox there, another window will pop up and it will ask you if you have another ballot to add or if you want to go back to the home screen. If you have multiple ballots, then feel free to hit add another ballot and it will take you all the way back to select what kind of election you're going to be reporting to. If this is your only ballot, you can just hit go to home screen and you will be done. Your submission will be on that table we saw earlier. A couple of just quick housekeeping notes with regards to the form in the historical election period. You will have until January 1st, 2026 to submit all applicable information to our office. If you had a qualifying election within this last year in November, you will need to report that information as part of your historical data. You will not submit that for the annual reporting. That will just be for May and then going forward for each successive year. And I will pass it back to Frank.
Thank you, Brittany. And I do want to make one quick note or reference, and that is she and I have referenced Government Code Chapter 403, but for whatever reason, the legislature and the LBB missed the cleanup in that statute. And so there's two references to Chapter 403, sections 701, 702. One section includes Bitcoin, and the second section includes this bond tax database. So I would strongly encourage you to scroll further down beyond the Bitcoin section and get to the bond tax database initiative or project. And hopefully the LBB and the legislature can go back and clean up that portion of the statute. But coming back to our presentation here, let me go through several questions that have been asked over the last couple of weeks as we've been talking to a number of cities and special purpose districts and bond councils and others across the state. First, if our taxing unit has never had a bond or had a failed bond election and currently has no outstanding debt, are we still required to submit a report? The short and sweet answer to that is no, you do not need to. We have a number of utility districts that are dormant and have not levied a tax. Do they need to report? As long as the district proposed or voted on or issued a bond which is secured in whole or in part by ad valorem taxes in the last 10 years between the period of 2015 through 2025, then a report would be required in this case. Question 3, if a taxing unit holds multiple ballot propositions, such as bond propositions and or voter approved tax rate elections in the same election cycle, do all these propositions need to be reported on one form? No, you do not need to do this on one form, but rather you will use a single reporting tool as found in the e-system that Brittany directed you to, the Brady link, the bond reporting initiative database. And here you'll find that tool to make all your submissions. Within the tool, each election proposition would need to be entered and reported separately. If the taxing unit approved the bond at any point prior to 2015, but is still paying on the bond, does the taxing unit still need to report? Again, the simple and sweet answer to that is no. Question 5. What are the criteria to report into the database? Well, to do a report or make a report into the database, the local government must meet all three of these requirements, all three. First, it must meet the requirements as laid out in Tax Code Section 1.04, subsection 12. And that pertains to whether you are a qualified taxing unit as identified by this subsection. Secondly, be a qualified taxing unit that issues debt that is paid from or secured either in whole or in part by ad valorem taxes. And thirdly is you held a bond election or a voter approved tax rate, which means the voter approved tax rate for the taxing unit as calculated under Chapter 26 of the tax code. So if either of these were voted on by the voters, then you need to be reporting. Does my taxing unit need to report into this database? I touched on this a little bit on the previous question as to what is a qualified taxing unit. In Tax Code Section 1.04, subsection 12, it reads that a taxing unit means that a county, an unincorporated city or town, including a home rule city, a school district, a special district or authority, including a junior college district, a hospital district, or a noxious weed control district, or any other political unit of this state, whether created by or pursuant to the Constitution of a local, special, or general law that is authorized to impose and is imposing ad valorem taxes on property, even if the governing body of another political unit determines the tax rate for the unit or otherwise governs its affairs. Question 7, and that is the bond elections report form has 3 debt type options: GO bonds, revenue bonds, and Brittany mentioned PSF bonds a moment ago. Should bonds guarantee the PSF should be reported as GO bonds? What should be reported as PSF bonds? Here, our legal office gave us some guidance. And in this case, ad valorem tax supported debt guaranteed by the PSF should be reported as a GO bond, a general obligation bond, rather than a PSF bond. We are working to have the PSF option removed from the drop-down, and I believe that has already been corrected as highlighted by Brittany a moment ago. Question 8. We do not believe that many, if any, school districts will have historical information to report on the M&O election for the school district's ballot form. While we understand this is required by the statute, we don't believe it is related to VADERS or the voter-approved tax rate elections. When should the M&O elections for school district ballot form be used? In this case, it should only be used, you should only use the M&O elections for school district ballot form if the district holds an election to authorize an M&O tax under the Education Code, Chapter 45, during the years of 2015 or later. Lastly is, should a taxing unit that is holding a bond election in November of 2025 submit a report using the historical report database? In this case, the answer is yes. Or here that you should be submitting for an election held in November 25 that occurs during the 2025 tax year. And that should be included in the historical reporting tool. Now, if you have any other questions, that brings up the next slide. Do please feel free and call me, call Brittany, or call our fellow colleague Dan Knight in our office, and we'd be more than happy to assist. With that, I hope all goes well in your reporting, and if you have any needs for assistance, do please give us a call back. Thank you much. Have a good day. Bye-bye.